King Abdullah of Jordan is one of hundreds of world leaders, powerful politicians and billionaires who've been named in a major offshore data leak. A report released by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists has taken a year to compile. The so-called Pandora Papers shed light on previously hidden dealings of the elite and how they've used offshore accounts to shield assets collectively worth trillions of dollars.
We have emails, passport copies, bank statements that show how presidents, kings, princesses, billionaires and criminals hide and move money.
Among those named is the Czech Republic Prime Minister Andrej Babiš, who, during a televised election debate, denied any wrongdoing.
The money was sent out of a Czech bank. The money was taxed. It was my money and it returned back to the Czech Republic.
Others mentioned in the report include the presidents of Ukraine, Kenya and Cyprus, plus finance ministers of Pakistan, the Netherlands and Brazil, all of whom allegedly have ties to offshore companies. Former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair is also said to have saved over £300,000 in a property tax when buying a London office. He bought an offshore firm that owned the building, but there's no suggestion he was acting illegally. The Pandora Papers are a follow-up to a similar project release in 2016 called the Panama Papers, compiled by the same journalistic group.
And for the reaction from Brussels, I'm joined now by our reporter, Brian Carter. Hello, Brian. Well, we've heard several European names in the report. What more do we know?
That's right, Andrea. There are more than 300 politicians and political leaders around the world that are named in this investigation. According to the data compiled by the ICIJ, just for Europe, you have 3 politicians in Portugal, 5 in Spain, 3 in France, 4 in Italy, and 4 in the Czech Republic. And the biggest name there in the Czech Republic, of course, is Prime Minister Andrej Babiš. According to this investigation, he bought a 22 million euro property in France through a web of offshore shell companies. The problem is that he did not disclose these assets when he ran his campaign. And may I remind you that he ran on a campaign denouncing the corruption of political and economic elites in the Czech Republic. And this is a man who is facing re-election, so we'll see how these revelations affect his chances of being re-elected. The other big name is Cyprus President Nikos Anastasiadis. He is said to have set up a law firm which basically acted as an offshore go-between for wealthy Russian individuals. And this is a country, Cyprus, that's already been criticized for its golden passport scheme, which allowed rich individuals basically to buy their way into EU citizenship. Andrea?
Well, what's been the reaction from Brussels? What's the mood there?
So far, I must say there hasn't been any big reaction here in Brussels, no reaction from any of the presidents of the main institutions. A few MEPs have reacted, and it's likely that we'll hear more MEPs throughout the course of the day. I think, Andrea, there's some sort of embarrassment here in Brussels at these revelations, because it shows that despite the number of leaks that we've seen in the last few years and the number of massive investigations such as the Panama Papers, the Paradise Papers, the LuxLeaks, which have shown the shady financial dealings of wealthy individuals, well, basically Western governments have been unable to really curb this phenomenon and to really crack down on these offshore companies. And this comes at a time when Europe is trying to set up some sort of uniform tax for corporations. But as long as these offshore companies still exist, it will be very hard to really target those rich individuals and make them pay their fair share. May I just remind you that according to the OECD, there's $11.3 trillion that rest in offshore companies, and this is a sum that is way enough to feed and provide health care to everyone on Earth.
Details of how Tony Blair and his wife Cherie bought this office building in London are among the revelations of the Pandora Papers. The former British Prime Minister and his wife avoided hundreds of thousands of pounds in property transaction taxes because they bought it by buying an offshore company based in the British Virgin Islands, which owned it. Valued at £6.5 million or €7.5 million back in 2017, Had it been a normal transaction, they would have been liable for stamp duty of £312,000, the taxes that everyone pays on property transactions here in the UK. But this legal loophole, criticised by campaigners as being something only wealthy people can do, meant that they didn't have to. Since then, the offshore company has been dissolved into a UK-based company. Sherry Blair, whose consultancy firm occupies the building, told The Guardian newspaper there was nothing unusual or underhand in the transaction, that the sellers insisted they sell the company and not the building by itself. And she said that the company is now subject to the UK tax and regulatory regime, and all taxes have been paid ever since. Ty Genwright, Euronews in London.